All right. Hi again, everyone. Welcome and good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. Thank you so much for joining us virtually today. My name is Hala Alawi, and on behalf of Atmosphere Press, I am so pleased to welcome you to today's event, an afternoon of authenticity. We'll be hearing from Travis Hupp, reading from the poetry collection Faster Annihilators, released June 20th, 2023. Blair Sorrel reading from the nonfiction text A Schizoid at Smith, released August 28th, 2023. And Jack Wallace reading from the thriller No Good Deed, which is releasing this week, February 6th, 2024. I guess technically next week, but regardless, very soon. All three authors' books can be purchased from both online retailers and from select bookstores. And of course, you can order the books on Atmosphere Press's website. That's at atmospherepress.com/books. I'm also going to put some links in the chat for you all. At the end of today's event, we are going to have time for audience questions. So during the readings, if you have a question for one or more of our authors, you can go ahead and type that in the chat and I'll make sure it gets asked. And then during the actual reading itself, please stay muted just so we can keep extraneous sound at a minimum. Of course, you can always use that chat for any praise and comments you'd like to share as well. And one last note is that we at Atmosphere Press appreciate your support today and always. If you have a manuscript of your own, we would love to read it. So submit your work today to books@atmospherepress.com. Again, thank you so much for tuning in and supporting Travis, Blair, and Jack. Let's start off with our first reader, who is Travis Hupp. Travis lives in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. When he's not writing, he's usually getting outsmarted by his 16-year-old Pomeranian Oz and his 10-year-old terrier Willow, who have decided to ask for forgiveness instead of permission. Faster Annihilators is his first published work, and his second book, Sin and I, will be out later this year. Faster Annihilators is a poetry collection that chronicles a gay man's struggle to reject conformity, demand more from himself, and thrive in a society that is still inexcusably oppressive. And with that, we'll hear from Travis himself.
Hi, everybody. So I decided to read some selections from the Hope section of my book. It's divided into different sections, but I feel like we all need a little bit of hope right now. So I'm going to read some selections from that section of the book. The first one is called Warring Forces. I've never learned how to make a feeling go away. Never, not a one. I just collect them, marveling at how high they can stack, how thinly defiled, how tightly compressed, how they become outmoded before I can even accept their presence. I've never gotten over anything. I've only gone without. I've abstained and maintained a facade of root change, and my reward is mostly heavenly, or there's mostly no reward. I've never gotten over cynicism, never given up optimism, never equalized warring forces. When I dream of peace now, it is only acquiescence, submitting for bronzing, a lament laminated. It breaks me and it builds me. It's enraging and enrapturing. Then the next one is Every Blessing. My friends, this poem's an essay making a case for unflinching clarity. We're all just trying to be somebody in a world where only some bodies are considered anybody. In this predicament of identity, the brightest brain can become ceremonial. Our neurological gravitas hasn't nearly the grit for this. Our cerebellum's posture, powerless, as fearsome as Queen Elizabeth, waving a gloved hand, throwing out a pitch, so we can pretend that somehow makes sense of this. Logic, illogically, prides itself on being an authority, yet logical deduction says authority is suspected more than trusted. Logic is the moat yawning wider till there's no ground to build a castle on. Logic is always a hospital bed, a vaccination, a plaintive, painful placebo for a soul's unsterile doctrine. Do you know you're stricken? Why you know so intimately what you're stricken with? It's logic, flouncing about behind the scenes, doing nothing of note right now but naming every illness. My friends, you'll probably know a blessing when you see it, and you can tell because the enjoyment of it is somewhat hindered by reason. My friends, for every blessing, there's a zealot to call it a symptom. It hit me one day in an avalanche of obviousness that we got our knowledge of knowledge reversed. Logic is a luxury, but it's simply not very smart. It chooses the clinic in lieu of the meadow, replaces the robust I must with the monotone echo I can't. The moment we make introductions, logic looms with threat of parting. We're too heavy for the sky because common sense is on our backs. Am I on time?
Yes,
Good to go for?
definitely.
Okay. All right. So the next one is comma hoarder. Um, Kinds of things that alter perception are friends having faith or sudden heart failure. Maybe a recipe for soup you can be poor and still afford, whittling down your vices, telling off your boss, or your mother gracefully dying. Some uncles, classmates, your favorite cousin. After a lot of dying, hallucinations are common. Philosophy is my friend now. Epicurus is my friend. Curl my soul's toenails arrogance and your homework are my friends. You use too many commas, abuse your brackets, wall it off, says you, box it in. You are too many things to me. I hoard your spare commas and burn through their legions. Because kinds of things that alter perception are the long limp from the fire lick or beer pong in a haunted basement. Everything we're too old for before getting the hang of being young, dreams under duress, defying death, grammatically incorrect thug. The next one is called Hell of a Wreck. My brain recycles everything except the intents. Small talk forgotten the second we stop talking. But when you fell inside yourself, stunned to learn your own depth, when you wanted to get to the top so bad you leapt the middle steps, when you were always one hell of a wreck and being scared brought out your best, and you remained ahead of the game, that I'll never forget. Seems like your maelstrom has passed, let you relax. All those swirling sands settled back to land. Glad as I am, I gotta admit it makes me lonely. My life is still a cyclone, and it gets scary when it throws me. And the next one is called Broadcast Tower. I find reflections of everything in all of it. Ropes of exhaled smoke, eyes climb diligent to higher levels, fortified by drag after drag, drags me from the body that much faster. Split sidewalk shows me honesty. We take the convenient route even when it's far from perfect. Someone cries out, cuts it short, shuts their mouth. Another broadcast tower relaying its love and anguish, muffled too soon to be sure I even heard it. Building across the street, vines that try to hide it, like the you and me we try to be, pretending it's us growing when things are growing around us. I loosen my grip on all of it, try not to conjure the ropes quite as often. My eyes can climb up other things or rest for a time on someone's best regions. A sidewalk is just a sidewalk. Not every chalk message is meant for me. Still, sooner or later, with tower upon tower, one or two will broadcast my frequency. The vines don't conceal what's real, they just make it apparent from a distance that there are certain embraces you're trapped in if you get wrapped in. How am I on time? Am I still good?
Yes, yep.
All right. The next one is called From the Depths. My love now it rises from the depths I did consign it, not willingly, never willingly, just by aversion of eyes. By believing in a need for heavy artillery when a soft touch was called for to open shells carefully. When at last tomorrow manifests, when I truly crack dropped on rocks, it's actually relaxing to find my casing broken off. So I cut through the wind that plays me like a violin without any drive to write a poem called Thicker Skin. My loss now I find them, as they were before I denied them. They may fail me, may even betray me. Perhaps not with intent, surely not with every breath. When this abyss widely gapes, a panic follows to escape. I too forget my knowledge, fail, even betray. I've learned the more you care, the easier it is to make mistakes. My luck, now I change it, hammer and nail it. I still have all the aches, won't pretend they're easy to take, won't pretend to not feel grateful for who I'm still here with to ache. When at last the clock ticks away this life's final seconds, and I'm there beside it, thinking it odd it sounds so distant, I'll stretch before the rest that hovers, amputated from time, and give myself back with satisfied pride. This one is called Agility. Swing the gates open for more than animosity, fan to that same old inferno, burning deeper than third degree. The gauze of the written word, the salve of my own devising is enough to start the healing. Forcing out gathered shrapnel with every movement, stretching senses beyond physical limitations, trying to hear multiverse singing, listening with my own sense of feeling, exploring and recording in gossamer hours when I know just what it means. Triggers may be pulled, scattershot may hit me. Because I want to be a messenger, I preclude my own agility. To speak to guns like microphones, empowered by threats to me and my own, moved by the beauty of bloody. This one is called Fortress, and I won't give too much background on it, but at one point I got yoked up into jail for something that I didn't actually do, and I wrote this poem while I was in jail. Um, Fortress. Can't see out, but I can see in. Feel my way by intuition. It won't be that bad, even though it hurts way too much. I choose belief. I'll just have to toughen up. No clocks in this fortress that protects the world from my wounded heart. Once branded a criminal, time means nothing at all. You just get wrung out trying to wash the stain off. Still, I choose wild hope in the face of creeping torture. They captured an artist, but they paint the wrong portrait. This one is called The Voice Will Keep Returning. A voice does no good, full volume into the breach of negative space unheeding. Now I'm suddenly granted a platform. I hope I've a rasp left for any audience. I'd like to say this is simply who I am, and I'm just a nobody, as representative of everybody as anybody else. And you don't know how it feels to make sounds in places soundproofed. I've cleared my throat approximately 500 times since morning, straining against a constricting trachea, not meant to breathe indifference or the air's more hostile elements. My truth may not be your truth, but it's the only truth that fuels me, and I see now that it isn't so much that it's hard to understand me. It's hard to just admit you have it in you to understand me without seeing images of a carpenter your people say built the world against me. That's what some people say, but the carpenter tells me different. The sounds are on my tongue as my vocabulary is reconnecting. Some things are said for no purpose, no benefit, besides the entitlement to shed them. When I love, I'm proud of loving. My regard isn't just for anatomy. I'm not led around by hard-ons, but by the interweaving sinews of something within me, around me, and more than me. And the dam that holds the words back might be broken unless it opens to release mounting pressure that froths with pent-up steam. So the voice will keep returning, despite the air that keeps thinning. The words will keep slipping, and I can't promise I'll try to catch them because no one has that many aquariums. The sinews will keep stretching outward, upward, then downward, coursing through roots and filaments that riot to feel them. And if that makes me a devil, hell must be purest heaven. My truth will keep fueling me, and I'll keep refueling willingly as I keep understanding that you might keep choosing to misinterpret me. I'll never finish talking, to myself or to you, till it stops feeling the same most times as talking to high strangers. I'll fashion words into olive branches or, if called for, into razors. Yes, I will fashion words to do the work of polygraphs, separate my dogs from the vaguely canine sewer rats, committing to memory every spike and honest line. Words are all they've allowed me, but not all I'll allow myself. Am I good on time still?
Yeah, you got a little bit of time if you want to read a little more.
All right, let's see.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
Hypocrites.
Oops, sorry, you can, I accidentally muted you, Travis, so if you want to unmute, that would be great. Oh, Travis, you're still muted. It's the button in the bottom left of the screen.
See. Bold Blue. I wrote this one right after Barack Obama got elected to his, I think it was his first term, but it might have been his second term. These poems have been written over the last 25 years. So it's called Bold Blue. It's an exciting time to be alive. No one has disposable income except the elite who are largely disposable, but the upheaval is graphed in such bold blue directions. It's free to observe and sometimes to join in. The storyline telegraphed with a fine poetic justice. Sometimes I must remind myself, and sometimes to move the plot along, I must remember to forget. Now we're moving into the love section of the book. This one's called Baby I Know. I know, baby, I know, you always go crazy in private. It's all right, okay, it's all right, but next time, please invite me. This one I wrote when I was working in bookstores for about 10 years. Love is ours. Love is ours among the huddled, wisecracking masses, giving our increasingly uncharitable opinions to the bitter cold wind that brittles them and strikes them from the record. We're not on the clock right now. We really needn't worry. It's okay to be flesh and blood right now. Forms of life framing thoughts against the company's best interests, laughing all we can at the very concept's ridiculousness. Anyone having a boss, anyone being a boss, anyone thinking they're in charge of anyone they can pee on. You can't do it without pissing them off unless you get consent first. That's not necessarily what I'm here for I know love is ours, even if you don't laugh like I do when the butt kissers call the boss boss. Now, the store has got a sexism department and courses on intimidating poses. Booksellers, no, 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 we're a branch of the armed forces. I'll see your dosed up regulars and raise you militantly gouging them. Best thing about the member card is anywhere you shove it, you'll like it. The flavor explosion of lacquered plastic will smash your whole damn palate. Seriously, though, love is ours. Love and yours and mine, but not the store's. Just because it's a reason why I haven't blown up the premises is in no way meant to imply it belongs to the home office. Love is ours, ours, ours. I'll put it back if you delete it. Don't go in when your cig is done. Stay out here and get me heated. Lucky ones. In the disparity between what is and what's real, between what I admit and what I conceal, I catalog fully my culpability in every crime I committed or abetted, and how I petitioned tribunals to triple my penance. So yes, I did my time, though you weren't there to see it, and you think nothing's real unless you're a witness. And yes, I love you, you oblivious genius. I love you so much right now, I just want to smash things. Because I've never kissed you except those times I was sleeping. Odds are I won't get to, because goners aren't lucky. But I testify true, I was lucky once. I was on the run with the lucky ones. Damn what the lucky won, and lost to loathsomeness pre-goner era. It left me wondering if once was my quota. If I luck out again, the whole sky might fold inward. If the whole sky folded inward, then would you kiss me? If everything was ending, could we finally start something? I need to know now that I've seen your eyes. They back cliches new again. They chamber cool fire. Do holes in your vision kiss my reflection, or is that really me there, in your eyes swimming? Or behind your eyes drowning, no longer protesting, the fight going out of me, help isn't coming. Craving conjures. The treasure box is desolate. You invited, but he doesn't come in. There's no pride in the pain anymore. Humor tries, but the joke just hangs there. The neighborhood fog is a sudden barbed blanket. Anything could come from anywhere, except that one thing your craving bids you conjure. There's no luck in the love anymore. A parade jangles by. It stops you in place, but it's not in your honor. The bed is not your bed anymore. He fell asleep there once, and that makes it his. There's no peace any place anymore. He stood on that porch before. He shops at that store. So try, humor, try, but the treasure's been lifted. Because I can't forget it, I must walk in the fog. Let it take me anywhere, take from me anything, until craving conjures and he comes parading in.
All right. I think that would be a great place to stop there with the poetry collection, Travis, but thank you so much.
Thank you
I
very
just want to
much.
say also, like, starting with Hope, like you said, was a really great way to just bring us into this reading. And then we
Thank
delved through
you.
so many themes and issues there. So, and the audience, I can tell, is really enjoying it from the chat response too.
Thank you,
Great. So
everybody.
reading next. Yeah, of course. Reading next today is Blair Sorrel. Blair managed stints as Free Time's dollar-wise dilettante columnist, Together Dating Services matchmaker, and New York Blood Services apheresis recruiter. Blair also worked as the founder of Street Zaps, a stray voltage clearinghouse that the National Electric Code showcased sporadically. Con Edison and the Electric Power and Research Institute respected, Channel 11/WPIX featured, and that former Las Vegas Mayor Oscar Goodman made an official public service. She was the first community representative that Con Edison invited to their annual Jody S. Lane Stray Voltage Detection, Mitigation, and Prevention National Conference starting in 2008. A Schizoid at Smith, How Overparenting Leads to Underachieving is a breakthrough female narrative instilling greater understanding and possible prevention of the cryptic schizoid condition. Blair talks candidly about her own experiences while inviting others to learn more from her text. And with that, Blair, take it away. You'll just want to unmute in the bottom left of the screen.
I want to dedicate this to Dan McMacken. Throughout my tutelage at Winbrook School, the principal, Mr. Blaney, registered as little more than a self-effacing, bespectacled, bald pate meandering through the corridors, overseeing the cafeteria staff in the lunchroom, or making an occasional awkward suit-clad appearance near the dust-filled sandbox. Like many administrators, he possessed a bland, featureless face and insipid deportment. He drew scant attention as he made his perfunctory rounds of the brick building with its low-slung water fountains, miniature furnishings, and Rorschach-like primary colors splattered in arresting juvenile artwork. Though Mr. Blaney did not make much of an impression on me, I must have made one on him or one of his underlings, and a highly aberrant one even at a pudgy-cheeked age of 6. For the next thing I knew, my mother and aunt were escorting me to a barren room for something grown-ups called Miller psychological testing. Mr. Miller's classroom contrasted with all others I'd entered. I waited for the other little shavers to file in, but none arrived. A man sat me at a desk with a number 2 pencil and a partially blank booklet freighted with lots of numbered words and pictures. If this game were meant to replace my Saturday cartoons, I wasn't having nearly as much fun with it. Also, I couldn't grasp how this black and white edition would improve my speed like the Evelyn Wood reading dynamics advertised on TV. No Mr. Miller or dunce cap in sight, to my enormous relief. Whatever happened with teachers and me, and sometimes detention, my mother's homeschooling would amend. Liberated, I could pursue my own more naturalistic curriculum. My parents likely resigned themselves to my lost cause status at this stage. Such distraction, lack of discipline, and panic attacks all rolled into one enervating loser. These stalwarts of the greatest generation promptly ceded to the woeful admission of having spawned a born under a bad sign under sheepdog. Mother, never at a loss of words, formulated a newfound dismissive, just suited for manual labor, as if that axiom could be rubber stamped on my wrist. This latest swipe, in effect, hand-canceled my self-assurance for a good many years. Some teachers groused that I was staring out the window, not at the blackboard, much in the manner of a jailbird contemplating making a break. And with summer approaching, I would indeed be sprung, free to pursue my feral escapades, spying an occasional pheasant in the brush, or glimpsing an actual hobo with a stick bag, traipsing to Route 2 were more enriching studies as far as I was concerned. I was living on my own terms, my days akin to those of picaresque heroes or lovable rogues, reveling in the physical world and revealing then and now a far greater rapport with non-judgmental critters. Race relations were on the tip of everyone's tongue in 1964. President Johnson signed into law the landmark Civil Rights Act, ensuring that Negroes and other minorities could no longer be denied service based on the color of their skin. We Americans were now one people. My biology teacher, Mrs. Hickey, offered her own proof of our unanimity as a correlation to this breakthrough legislation. A little-known fact she confided to my class in a low-pitched confessional tone is that Negroes, or colored babies as they were then designated, are born Caucasian and darken postpartum, giving them that telltale pigmentation. I casually alluded to the state-of-the-art Darwinism when I returned home that afternoon. My parents decried this quackery over dinner, even proposing my removal from school. Mrs. Hickey's sotto voce pseudoscience may have proved fortuitous. Cantonese was the only regional cuisine at that time. Venues were often festooned with lots of red and gold gewgaws, the preeminent Dragons and Lanterns School of Design, while serving lobster sauce loaded dishes, We were seated, and in a few short minutes, Dad's buddy Earl metamorphosized into the kind of customer servers universally detest. You probably know the type. Flying a freak flag over free jasmine tea. Don't keep using that same bag, he lambasted the obsequious waiter, scurrying and sloshing in servitude. My stomach roiled throughout this whole parsimonious display, and the drive home made me even more rebellious. I don't recall what I sampled that day or what anyone discussed, but how desolate I felt, and my firm wish that we would never again meet for a fun run. The terminal year of this extraordinary decade, by which I mean the 60s rather, climaxed with some final acts and fearsome headlines. Most quailed at the gruesome Sharon Tate murders in August 1969, a fright at their sheer senselessness and brutality. The Beatles gave their last performance on Apple Records' roof. Jim Morrison battled indecency and profanity charges that decimated the Doors to the backdrop of a nation growing more rabidly conservative. And come December 6th, the free concert the Rolling Stones bestowed as a holiday present to fans, the West Coast Woodstock at Altamont Raceway sank into a Hell's Angel rampage, leaving a corpse on stage. This macabre denouement dashed the utopian dream once and for all. Sorry. You really didn't know him, she then added about my father. Certainly not the ne'er-do-well deficient in the dad gene that Temptations belted out in Papa Was a Rolling Stone, but a victim of his era's conventional expectations and maternal demands. My papa probably didn't innately want the trappings of family. Nowadays, more social options exist, and heterosexual men may remain single longer or lifelong without the veiled suspicion of homosexuality. Tying the knot still extends respectability, especially to physicians, the most prestigious of professions. Not being committed to a marriage preempts being entrapped in a failing one and the increased odds of children manqué. The wag who jested mental illness is hereditary. You get it from your children must have read Sidney's mind. You're driving me crazy, my father groaned from behind his Nashada Country Club menu. You are crazy, I thought to myself, as most teens would, especially those of my generation, inured to distrust those over 30. Conquered and noble the presumptive harmony between the colonist and the Pennacock tribe. No accord between us that day. The same old riddle of we can talk. Seated in a stifling sun parlor, we shared a queasy Sunday brunch, having both everything and nothing to say to one another. We could just as easily have been Rear Admiral George Stephen Morrison and his bellicose lizard-king son passing the salt in silence at the mess deck aboard the USS Bonhomme Richard. He didn't get him either. Give up any idea of singing or any connection with the music group because of what I consider to be a complete lack of talent in this direction, wrote his father, the commander of the United States Naval Forces overseeing the Gulf of Tonkin incident. Forget the literary thing, my father. the high-ranking army captain set forth, although it's always beautifully written. The military provided its officers with servants. Nonetheless, during his tour of duty, Sidney befriended a Korean orphan loitering on the base. All you'll learn here is foul language, he upbraided, subsidizing his schooling. I suddenly felt ignominy, underdressed in faded brown jeans, seated amid the well-tailored diners. Their displeased eyes locked on me as I approached the heaping hot trays, buffet servers, and beckoning aromas. At least my appetite didn't falter. The chipper waitress broke the wall of silence when she flaunted her spoon ring. In the 60s, the silverware bands came into vogue both as precious and preserving baubles. A father and daughter gripped their spoons in hearty readiness for the ice cream medley, now becoming more of a melting Alaska. As the hostess placed their bowls, the coiled utensil on her license digit flashed in the summer sun. Almost coquettishly, she bragged that the etched floral piece had been her mother's. Sentiment adorned her fingers as it had so many others for centuries before. Silver reconfigured as stories, memories, and significant occasions in the hearts and on the tapers of generations of wearers. The tradition began when 17th century English servants pilfered their master's cutlery to forge wedding alliances. I wished to steal away to wherever I could heal, if only she had waved a magic wand instead. I don't know how I'm doing with time.
Yeah, you've got a few minutes if you want to read a little bit more.
Henry Darger's life dissolved as mine evolved. If you've never heard of him, that's exactly how he'd like it. A reclusive janitor who dwelled in an unpresuming room for 40 years. His main chance came on entry to a Chicago nursing home, when an encouraging landlord upended his treasure trove of outsider art. What's the use of being talented if no one knows about it? My father carped it as I would not show my writing to anyone. Henry Darger was a textbook schizoid, the one we all know, but hardly get to know. Quote, Henry Darger is the man living in that house on your block that you've never met. He's the man who never talks about his family, girlfriend, wife, or friends, and by all accounts, has none. That's Project MK Ultra Henry Darger, inaugural post of this blog, August 24, 2012. Darger embodies Schizoid, sequestering right down to his custodian career. If only I had had more perspicacity and pursued an isolative path while in school. Needless to say, Daddy didn't send me to Smith to become a cleaning lady. Cushing, which was one of my dorms at Smith, softened cubist cutters, rough edges while suggesting some of Gillette's good bones. The quad circumscribed a micro neighborhood of picturesque identical houses. Though I tried to join in the gaiety, hilly area rightly construed that I was not a party person. To Nia's disappointment, I became noticeably more retiring when we attended one together. Kegs funneling beer were the focal point of these bibulous, blowsy shindigs. One Yuletide revelry in particular would become immortalized in Smith's history for its inordinate, you had to be there moment. The ladylike city room got all Frank Capra gussied up, couples linked, ornaments shown on fur roping, and spices seasoned a citrusy punch in a crystal bowl. All the accoutrements of a traditional sophisto-skewed festive hued gala. Sets of blotto eyes all at once shifted in the direction of a guest. Center stage A visiting male straddled the overstuffed sofa, yanking down his pants. A man-spreader who had the best seat in the house showed his appreciation with a scatological endowment to the college. A Mary Brown he would never live down. Saturday nights are right for fighting. Whoa! If you ever want to see 80 people clear out of a room faster than a bomb scare, man's boyfriend Trey embroidered every retelling. The life of the party tale took on a life of its own. For us homebodies, the buffet, bar, or both become home base. Command social performances like large family gatherings, holidays, baby showers are almost intolerable. The idea that they have to manage a college setting or a job with other people can sometimes be overwhelming and more than a little anxiety provoking or depressing. And that's Anita Sands, psychologist, on what it's like interacting with people who have been diagnosed with schizoid personality disorder.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Blair. I feel like we've gotten such a well-rounded understanding of not only, what you're writing about, but also your style. And I really thank you for sharing that with us.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah. So our final reader for today is Jack Wallace. Jack holds degrees from Gateway College and the University of Tennessee. He's written stories for many years about growing up in the Christ-haunted South and has one published novel, The Unrighteous Brothers, as well as many short stories, several of which have been published in literary journals. Jack lives in Nashville, Tennessee with his wife, Joanne, and his red lab, Lucy. He also spends many weeks at his Flat Rock, North Carolina cabin. He is most at home on a trail or fishing a stream in the mountains of North Carolina or Tennessee. Learn more at jackwallaceauthor.com. In the thriller No Good Deed, Christopher Jones offers a young Korean woman a ride to the Greyhound bus station, and within hours, his good deed plunges him into the dark, dangerous world of human trafficking. Chris is constantly driven forward by his sense of moral integrity, even when it puts him in harm's way to help others. I won't give anything else away, so Jack, you're up.
Thank you, Hala. First, just want to say this is based on an actual event, somewhat loosely based on an actual event that occurred here in Nashville a few years ago, where an Asian spa was raided by detectives, and this spa was located in the Tony area of Nashville, right across the street from Nordstrom's, hidden between a liquor store and a Domino's Pizza. And there were several women arrested, Asian women arrested at that Asian spa that day and accused of promoting prostitution. And later, after some more stories came out, these several of these women hardly spoke any English. Most did not know their address. They did not even know the town they were operating in at that point in time, and come to find out, many of them had only been in Nashville for a few months. So it's a clear case of sex trafficking, and my mind began to just wonder about how they felt. How did they wind up here in Nashville, Tennessee? And then I began to develop a story of one of those victims of sex trafficking, and from there came the arc of my story, No Good Deed. So I'll read just the opening scene and just a little bit of the second chapter. Kim pushed up on one elbow to check the time on the microwave clock. The blue numbers read 4:45. She lay back on her mattress and stared at the ceiling. Afraid of oversleeping, she'd been awake most of the night. The countdown had begun, 15 minutes before her escape. She raised herself on her elbow again, 14 minutes. The basement room was windowless, but a small lamp on a rickety table across the room gave enough light for Kim to peek out of her sleeping bag and ensure none of the other women were awake. Since they all arrived home most nights well after midnight, They were not likely to stir this early. Suki was sleeping next to her, only the top of her head peeking out of the red nylon sleeping bag, black hair spilling across her pillow. Kim considered nudging her and saying goodbye, but decided their whispers might wake up June and Jihu sleeping on mattresses a few feet away. She couldn't take that chance. Jihu would sound the alarm. Besides, Suki begged her not to leave. With tears in her eyes, her friend said the men would find her and beat her, or worse. 9 minutes. Kim traced the steps in her head. Jihu held the only key to the basement door. The men trusted her with it, and she kept it in the pocket of her satin jacket. Kim stroked Suki's hair. "Bye, my friend," she whispered, and then crawled from her sleeping bag and pulled on slippers, tiptoed to Jihu's jacket hanging on the back of a ladder-back chair, found the key, and eased up the basement stairs. While clutching her small purple purse that held $600 of mostly wrinkled 20s, she worked the key in the lock. Kim paused with her head sticking through the partially open door and listened for any movement. Minjun's bedroom door was cracked open, his ragged snoring providing a steady beat. Kwan's door was closed. She tiptoed to the front door of the house. This was her last chance to change her mind. Once she opened the door, she had 30 seconds before an alarm would sound. Minjun and Kwan would grab their pistols and burst out of their rooms to check for any intruders. Then they would hurry to the basement to count the women. Once they discovered she was gone, they would rush to the van and drive the streets searching for her. Kim bit her lip as she twisted the front door lock. She pulled the door open and slipped out into the pre-dawn darkness. Shivering in the early morning chill, she shut the door and ran across the street. She breathed faster. Her side ached as she sprinted between houses and darted across streets. 2 more blocks to White Bridge Road and the bus stop for downtown Nashville. She paused beside a large tree near a 1-story brick home. Doubled over, she gulped for air. She had not run any distance for the 4 years she had been in the United States. When her heart quit racing, Kim dodged around a tire swing hanging from a branch and hurried across the front lawn of the house. Her stomach lurched as she saw headlights slowly approaching. "Kwan and Minjun," she muttered. As she dashed to the corner of the house, the eve light flashed on, exposing her for a few seconds before she ducked into the shadows at the side of the house. She glanced over her shoulder. The car had slowed almost to a stop. Had they seen her? Then she realized a board fence at the back corner blocked her path through the yard. She squeezed behind a holly bush, the leaves prickling her bare arms. She held her breath and tucked her hands under her arms to still the shaking. The sound of the car's engine grew distant. Kim scooted from behind the holly bush, ran to the neighboring house, and found a clear path to the next street. Tears blurred her vision as she weaved between houses, putting distance between her and the mysterious car. She paused to catch her breath beside a 2-story brick home on the last street before White Bridge Road. The bright streetlights up ahead were her beacon. She peeked around the corner. After checking for headlights, she dashed the short distance down the street to a strip of restaurants and stores on the corner of White Bridge Road. Loose gravel poked through her thin slippers, but she hardly felt it. She checked over her shoulder again as she ran, fearing a van would wheel off the main road and roar across the parking area. The street was clear. She darted into a recessed entrance to a shoe store. The street light didn't reach into the cavernous space, and it appeared to be the best place to hide. For how long? She didn't know. but she could see the bus stop at the corner. She hoped it wouldn't be long before the bus arrived. If the sun came up soon, she would be visible to the street. Kim hunkered down and wrapped her arms around her knees, trying to make herself as small as possible. With her back pressed against the store entrance, she waited for the bus. And chapter 2. Something about early mornings in the spring, even a Monday morning, invigorated Christopher. The heater on the 10-year-old Buick sedan was turned on high. Both front windows were rolled down. Cold air pushed in around his neck and head, despite his gray hoodie and the Chicago Cubs baseball cap. At this hour, the suburban Nashville neighborhood was quiet. The Lumineers sang "Ho Hey" on the Roots radio station. Christopher hummed along as he crept slowly through the deserted neighborhood streets, slinging Tennesseans out the passenger window and then the driver's side. After nearly 2 years of this morning newspaper delivery route, he had the rhythm down, rarely missing a driveway. Not a bad arm for an over-the-hill, almost 40-year-old, he thought. He idly scanned the darker areas of the lawns. This older West Nashville community had big yards with mature trees, hedges, and thickets. And he occasionally saw a fox or a coyote on the prowl. Just last week, 3 deer, appearing out of nowhere in the mist, dashed across the street in front of him. A sudden movement near the next house caught his eye. It was still too dark to see much, but he thought it might be a person. He slowed for a better look. As the shadowy figure reached the side of the house, a motion detector spotlight flashed on. In the few seconds of light, he recognized the form of a slender woman before she darted quickly around the corner. He eased the car to a stop and strained to see more, but she was out of his line of vision. Why would a woman be running across the yard in the dark? She seemed in a hurry to hide. Was she trying to break into the house? He considered whether to turn into the driveway and knock on the door. No, better not get involved, he decided. Just do my job. He continued slowly down the street, reaching into the bin of rolled up newspapers in the passenger seat, bracing the steering wheel with his knees as he alternated throwing hands, slinging with his left, then his right. I'll stop there.
All right, Jack, leaving us on a bit of a cliffhanger there. But thank you so much for sharing with us. I mean, I've already read this and I feel stressed out just hearing you read about it. So I think, you really nailed the thriller genre. That's perfect. So at this time, we do have some time for our audience Q&A. So anyone in the audience, if you have a question for one or more of our authors, you can go ahead and type that in the chat and I'll make sure it gets asked. I do have a couple of questions that have been sent in already, so I'll start with those. The first question, this is for all three of you. This person says, let's see. What were your inspirations for your books, and when did you know you needed to write your ideas down into a full-length work? Maybe Jack, if you want to start us off, since you sort of mentioned your inspirations a bit at the beginning of your reading.
Well, I shared my inspiration, and I was in the midst of working on my first novel when this story hit the press about the raid on the Asian spa. So I began to just collect a little bit of information, follow the story for the few days that it was here in the press. And then after, almost a year later, began to seriously consider writing this novel and began to research sex trafficking. And that took me to some dark places. I really, felt like I needed to step away from it after researching a bit. But I began to just develop a story arc in my mind. And really almost 2 years after that incident, I began to write the story.
So kind of well, time is relative, but not an immediate timeline there. Jumping to you, Blair, what were your inspirations to write your book, and how did you know you wanted to record everything into a full-length work? Oh, Blair, it looks like you might have gotten muted again. So if you just go to the bottom left, you should see the unmute button.
Initially, I wasn't really sure where I was going with this. I felt that I had the opportunity during the pandemic to write, and it could have been an article for Psychology Today in my dreams, although schizoids dream a lot. I contracted with Harry Friedman, the author, and he felt there was just way too much stuff for it to be an article. And there really wasn't any inspiration. It's just, would I have the courage to come forward and say that I live with this, given the societal bias against any kind of mental condition? It's really a maladaptation, not a mental illness, although it does appear in the DSM. So there was that, it was like going full frontal with this. But I honestly felt that it was the best use of my writing. If I were to write about anything, I would want to elevate the profile of the disorder with the hope of preventing it, or at the very least, tweaking earlier intervention, because I was 33 years old when it was diagnosed. And it's very rarely diagnosed unless if the afflicted come in with some other kind of condition like depression or anxiety. They don't know they have it, and they kind of slip through the cracks. It results in a lot of homelessness, and I suspect death, suicide. I don't have the statistics for that, but it's a life that I don't think most people would really want to have. There's greater potential for happiness, and clinicians would say that man is meant to be social.
Yeah, I'm really interested to hear, it started as kind of a smaller work idea, and then from all of the ideas you had and all of the content to expand upon, it could really grow into something bigger. Jumping to you, Travis, what were your inspirations to write this book, and when did you know you needed to write all of your ideas into a full-length work?
Well, this book was written over the past 25 years, so there's been any number of things that inspired me. This goes back to when I first started writing right after I was leaving middle school, going into high school. So at first it started out just me writing stuff down as a way to deal with things. I didn't even initially realize, I don't think, that this was poetry, until I had an English teacher that actually introduced me to poetry in high school. And then I realized that it didn't just have to be a way for me to deal with things when I was upset. It could be a way for me to celebrate things when I was happy as well. And so I started just going out of my way to make a habit of writing. I think for a lot of people, when things get rough, it's easy to write. It's easy to write that kind of grievance, reaction to something bad happening to you, poetry, and I think that there's a place for that, but I went out of my way to also condition myself to write when I was happy, write when I appreciated something, write when something just was kind of like, and I didn't, something unexpected happened. So there's been all kinds of events that fit into that throughout the past 25 years. I've always been a very politically aware person who pays attention to the news and stuff. So I'm not one of those people that thinks it's necessarily rude to talk about politics and religion and stuff like that when there's an intersection there with people getting oppressed. I think it's more rude not to talk about it and to tell somebody who's been oppressed, well, you can't talk about it because it's rude to talk about how you've been oppressed. So that's in there too. And a lot of times people who have been marginalized, the only place we can go the only place we can go to react to it and process it ourselves is in our own poetry or our own journaling, because until we get it out there to its target audience, a lot of people aren't necessarily trying to hear it. So to that extent, it was partly me writing stuff down not to not bother other people with. But then when I realized later this particular piece has something to say and it's worth kind of making people uncomfortable if it has that effect, that became an inspiration as well. And I had multiple people tell me over the course of my life, hey, you should collect this into a collection of poetry. And I finally got around to it when I'm 41 years old. So it's a great
Yeah,
question. Thank you.
it's never too late, right? And I think a lot of people
Right.
are happy to see that you have. We've got a question from the chat. Jack, I know you answered this in the chat, but I think your answer is worth saying out loud because it's very interesting. This question is, can you tell us more about your research and were you able to visit the site where the women were held? And Jack, if you want to talk a little bit more about that.
I did, most of the research I did was about the issue of sex trafficking, and I did that online. But discovered some stories, some personal stories there from some women, particularly I was looking for women that were trafficked from Asia. And of course, those were horrific stories. I did visit the site. It's really just a couple of miles from where I live. And I did actually talk to the liquor store owner next door, and he said, I wasn't sure what was going on, but it looked a little suspicious to me. So that was really the gist of the research that I did. And I think the issue is well known. So there's a lot of material out there and a lot of other novels and books about sex trafficking, a lot of excellent organizations here in Nashville that deal with the issue. And in fact, I'm going to hold an author event at a place called Thistle Farms Cafe, which helps women that are trafficked. And it just seemed like the appropriate place to really launch the event. And I'll be sharing a few of the profits from the sales of books that night with that cause, because I think it's an excellent cause.
Absolutely. So if anyone here is in the area, you know where to go for that event. We've got a question. This is for Travis from Sally. Your reading was easy and fascinating to follow. How does your poetry look on the page? I feel like poets have become obsessed with line breaks and I find myself resisting it. Travis, I don't know if you have a copy of the book with you, but maybe if you could show us some, or if not, just describing it to us.
So my poetry is formatted in different ways. And it just seems natural to me to write it the way that I write it. And I don't always even fully understand why until I think about it later. And so they mostly have kept my formatting when they formatted the book. And so there's different ones, like, for instance, there's breaks between the lines and not enough ink. And I think looking back at it, that lets each line kind of breathe a little bit more. And then a lot of them, like Every Blessing, begins with my friends, this poem's an essay making a case for unflinching clarity. So it's more dense. They're more like an essay would be, although it's still poetry, so not exactly like an essay would be. For me, it's a very much a piece by piece decision, and it's just more intuitive than anything else. But that's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's great to get that kind of visual, especially with poetry, where that is such a integral part of the writing.
Yeah.
We've got a question now. This is for Blair and also for Travis. How did writing your books change how you perceived yourself? Did you feel more comfortable in your skin, more confident? Maybe did you uncover more questions about yourself? D, none of the above. Blair, do you want to kick us off with this one?
I was nervous because, schizoids are fearful of people. And here I was being very exposed and vulnerable. I've had mostly support from, commending it, that people haven't knew that something was kind of off about me. So it made it more approachable. I mean, on the spectrum of thing, it's not as serious as schizotypal or schizophrenia. I was very nervous about my sister's reaction because it's an airing of dirty laundry in public, and my parents have a side of their story and they're not around to defend themselves. It was a very different era, and I can see from most of the people living here grew up probably in the same time or more or less. that, there was more stigma and more, if somebody had a kind of mental condition, it was a character flaw and it was shunned. And so I think now, schizoid or not, or any other disorder, I think there is a greater likelihood of intervention. If anything, we live now in an age of more transparency or too much information. But I was apprehensive given who I am, and I'd never written anything of this length. And I didn't know if I could do it. It would be a bummer for people to read about it and they'd want to kill themselves just from undergoing the journey with me. But the music was my lifeline and I loved reviving the era. I wish I could bring all those rock stars and that great music back. I mean, nobody comes close to Hendrix in all these years, in my opinion, and many others. So it was fun for me. The social history, it was an exciting, turbulent time. I'll let Travis take over.
Okay. I'm sorry, what was the question one more time? My dog was jumping around. I got distracted for a minute.
No worries. The question was, how did writing your book change how you perceived yourself, whether it was for the
Okay.
better, maybe for the worse, maybe neutral? Any feelings about that?
Well, it definitely helped me become more brave, I think, and see myself as more brave because like a lot of people, I had a rough childhood. I've had a rough life in a lot of respects. Very grateful for the blessings that I've had, but things have been rough. And so when things are rough, the way that the emotions that incites in you, are things that are not always the easiest thing to share. But I think that, it helps other people do the same when one person can be brave. So yeah, I feel braver and also just very gratified by the reaction to the book so far. It's been overwhelmingly positive. So that's made me feel accomplished as well. So
Yeah, I'm really happy to hear that. I mean, I think that's one of the most rewarding things about putting yourself out there. I do want to be conscious of time. So with that, I think we're ready to wrap up the Q&A. It was so great to Blair, just for being here with us and sharing your words, your thoughts with us today. And thank you to everyone in the audience for being here with us as well. Don't forget that you can order Faster Annihilators, a Schizoid at Smith, and No Good Deed from the links that I'm putting in the chat here. And please also consider checking out atmospherepress.com to browse our new and forthcoming releases, sign up for our email newsletter, and submit a book manuscript of your own. You can submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com and just let us know that you attended today's event. We'll look forward to hearing from you. And other than that, that's it. So have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks.
thank you very much.
Thanks.